Sophia, a beautiful young girl, had not lived an easy life. As an orphan, she lived with her sister at St. Ursulae. Her life changed when one day she received news that a wealthy merchant wanted to marry her. The abbess convinced her that this was an opportunity for a better life, as long as Sophia could give the man a child. In return, Sophia's sisters were sent to America for a brighter future. 3 years had passed since her marriage to an old merchant named Cornelis, but they had yet to have a child. A friend suggested that Cornelis send Sophia back to the orphanage, but he still wanted to give her 6 more months to conceive. On the other hand, Sophia's tailor started hinting that she should maintain her appearance. 3 years without a child could be seen as a sign that Sophia had lost her value in the household. One evening, their maid, Maria, served fish for dinner. Cornelis started complaining because they had eaten fish too often that week. He speculated that Maria might have a relationship with a fisherman. That suspicion turned out to be true. Maria was secretly involved with a fish vendor named Willem. As night fell, Cornelis and Sophia once again tried to conceive in their bedroom. Meanwhile, in another room, Willem sneaked into Maria's quarters, enjoying a beautiful night with her. Following Maria's suggestion, Sophia visited a doctor named Sorg, who was known for helping women get pregnant. After hearing Sophia's story, the doctor took her to a special room to start the process. However, once Sophia realized the doctor's true intentions, she became furious, slapped him, and rushed out of the room in disgust. Despite Cornelis praying every night and trying repeatedly, their efforts remained fruitless. This situation was starting to make Sophia feel even more pressured. Feeling desperate, Cornelis decided to call a young painter named Jan. He wanted a portrait of himself with Sophia as a keepsake, proof that he had a beautiful young wife. When Jan arrived at their home, he discussed the painting's concept with Cornelis, who requested specific elements to give the portrait a prestigious feel. As Sophia descended the stairs, Jan was immediately captivated by her beauty. As he began sketching, their eyes met frequently, as if something unspoken was passing between them. At that time, in the Dutch Republic, the tulip trade was booming. Rare flowers, especially those with unique striped patterns called breakers, were highly valuable. Willem, hoping to strike it rich, visited a bustling tulip market. There, he saw a plot of unopened white tulips being auctioned by a man named Mr. Prater. After some negotiation, Willem successfully acquired the flowers for 18 florins. Meanwhile, Jan struggled to complete Sophia's portrait because Cornelis kept interfering. Frustrated, Jan decided to recreate the pose in his studio using a mannequin and his friend Gerrit as models. Later, Sophia told Cornelis that she didn't want Jan to return to their house. She claimed she didn't like the painter. Cornelis agreed and said he would find another artist to finish their portrait. However, that night, in the middle of Cornelis and Sophia's attempt to conceive, Sophia suddenly stopped everything. In a soft voice, she said she had changed her mind. She wanted the painter to come back. The next day, Willem excitedly showed Maria the tulip certificate he had just purchased. Maria was a bit worried that Willem was wasting money, but he assured her that the price of the flower would double within a week. With such a huge profit, they could soon get married and start their life together. Meanwhile, Jan continued working on the couple's portrait while Cornelis had to leave for important business matters. Alone, Jan took another canvas and began painting Sophia. Their eyes met often, and slowly, they both began to realize the growing attraction between them. While working in his studio, Jan couldn't ignore his growing feelings. After much reflection, he finally admitted to himself he was in love. Unable to hold back any longer, he rushed to see Sophia. At the same time, Sophia had just realized that her heart belonged to Jan. Filled with hope, she went to the painter's studio, but they nearly missed each other. Maria, who had been observing everything, told Jan that Sophia had already left. Disappointed, Jan decided to write her a letter. Maria could only smile, fully aware of what was happening between them. On her way home, Sophia accidentally witnessed a tragic event. A man who had lost all his money in the tulip trade decided to end his life by drowning himself. That night, Cornelis told Sophia that Jan had requested tulips as payment for his painting. Cornelis asked Maria to deliver the flowers to Jan's studio the next day. However, Maria, who seemed to understand Jan's true intentions, refused, saying she had other matters to attend to. In the end, Cornelis asked Sophia to deliver them herself. When Sophia arrived at Jan's studio, neither of them could resist their feelings any longer. Without hesitation, they gave in to the emotions they had been suppressing. Even though their relationship had to remain a secret, Jan continued working on the couple's portrait. Meanwhile, Willem visited the head priest at the orphanage to check on the tulips he had purchased. As he inspected the bulbs, he noticed something unusual. a white tulip with deep red streaks. It was a breaker tulip, one of the rarest and most valuable types. Without realizing it, Mr. Prater had sold Willem a rare flower for only 18 florins. Wasting no time, Willem immediately auctioned the tulip with a starting price of 810 florins. In no time, the bid skyrocketed, and he eventually sold it for 920 florins. Mr. Prater asked if Willem had given the flower a name, and with great pride, Willem named it Admiral Maria, a tribute to the woman he loved. But the happiness didn't last long. Sophia secretly stole Maria's cloak and slipped out. Willem, seeing the figure from a distance, mistook her for his beloved. Overjoyed, he chased after her to share his good news. But when Willem saw the woman entering Jan's studio and embracing the painter, his heart shattered into pieces. Elsewhere, Cornelis was playing cards with his friends, discussing the ever-rising price of tulips. Meanwhile, Sophia was becoming more deeply entangled in her love for Jan. But in the midst of their joyful moment, the doorbell suddenly rang. Cornelis had come home early. Panicking, Sophia quickly put her clothes back on and hurriedly said goodbye to Jan. Across town, a drunk and heartbroken Willem sat in a tavern when a woman tried to approach him. He rejected her, but without him realizing it, she managed to steal his money. When Willem noticed, he became furious and insulted her. One of the woman's brothers stepped in and a fight broke out. When the authorities intervened, Willem was arrested and forced to join the Dutch Navy. He would have to serve for a year before being allowed to return. Sophia made it home just in time. However, Cornelis arrived earlier than expected. Carefully, she returned Maria's cloak to its place, but in doing so, she accidentally woke Maria. Wasting no time, Sophia rushed upstairs and slipped under the covers, just before the night turned into a moment of them trying to conceive a child. The next morning, Maria was confused and frustrated upon hearing rumors about Willem's disappearance. Word had spread that Willem had gone to sea, and Maria's heart shattered at the thought that maybe he had never truly loved her. Even worse, Maria was pregnant with Willem's child, and the fear of the shame that would soon fall upon her haunted her endlessly. Sophia worried that Cornelis would dismiss her if he found out about the situation. However, Maria firmly warned her that if she was thrown out, she wouldn't hesitate to expose Sophia's affair to her husband. When Jan revealed his finished portrait painting to Sophia, she immediately confessed that Maria knew about their secret relationship and would most likely tell Cornelis. That night, Sophia heard a commotion downstairs. When she went to check, she found her husband still awake, looking restless. Trying to comfort him, she listened as Cornelis began to open up about his painful past. Cornelis confessed that when his first wife was in labor, he had asked the doctor to prioritize her safety over their babies. But fate had other plans. It was as if God had punished him by taking both his wife and child at once. To soothe her husband, Sophia decided to lie. In a soft voice, she told him she was pregnant. The news filled Cornelis with overwhelming joy. He saw it as a second chance to become a father. The next morning, Cornelis was still beaming with happiness. During that time, Maria accidentally broke an expensive vase belonging to him. When she learned that the vase was worth 6 months of her salary, she broke down in fear. But Cornelis, still caught up in his happiness, simply smiled and told her to be more careful next time. Meanwhile, Sophia started crafting her devious plan with Maria. She would pretend to be pregnant while Maria hid her own pregnancy. Once the baby was born, Maria would raise the child as its nanny, while Sophia would finally escape with Jan. However, to pull this off, they needed a doctor, and this was where the annoying Dr. Sorg came into play. During their fake checkup, the doctor attempted unnecessary examinations, enraging Sophia, who slapped him hard. Dr. Sorg eventually informed Cornelis that, for the safety of Sophia's unborn child, they should sleep in separate rooms for the time being. Without hesitation, Cornelis, trusting him completely, agreed. Once Cornelis left, Dr. Sorg secretly examined Maria, who was actually pregnant. He was shocked to see just how far these two women were willing to go to pull off their elaborate scheme. A few days later, Cornelis told Sophia that he had to leave for a few weeks due to urgent business matters. Meanwhile, Maria started experiencing morning sickness, and Sophia quickly pretended to be ill to cover for her. With Cornelis now out of the house, Sophia had more freedom to spend time with Jan. They began planning their escape together. As they discussed their options, Jan realized they would need a large amount of money to run away. Sophia recalled her childhood as an orphan and mentioned the tulip garden at the orphanage where she was raised. That's when a crazy idea popped into Jan's mind. That night, Jan and Garrett sneaked into St. Ursula to steal some highly valuable tulip bulbs. However, things didn't go as planned. Garrett ended up being chased by a flock of aggressive geese, while Jan got trapped and was caught by the abbess. The next morning, Jan met with the abbess and sincerely apologized for his attempted theft. Speaking with deep regret, he admitted that he was in love with a woman but didn't have enough money to build a future with her. As they talked, Jan grew curious when he saw the abbess weighing a tulip bulb. She explained that a flower's weight could determine its value. She then told him about Admiral Maria, a flower they had accidentally sold at a low price, only to later discover it was incredibly valuable. Fortunately, the last buyer of Admiral Maria had given them a seed of another highly precious flower, which could be sold for a fortune. Jan's curiosity grew even more. He asked the abbess to teach him the art of tulip trading, hoping that this could be the solution to his financial troubles. Meanwhile, at the tavern, the tulip market was going wild. Prices had tripled in just 1 month. Despite knowing the risks of a market crash, Jan couldn't resist the temptation of owning a rare tulip. Determined, he sold all his paintings and used the entire profit to bid on a single rare bulb. It didn't take long. Within a week, Jan had made a huge profit. He returned to the orphanage and negotiated to buy Admiral Maria for 1,400 florins. However, Volum was still nowhere to be found, making Maria increasingly anxious. One day, on her way home from the market, Maria suddenly felt contractions. That was when Sophia saw the perfect opportunity to execute their elaborate plan. She pretended to be in labor and immediately told Cornelis to fetch the midwife. Meanwhile, Jan prepared to escape with Sophia. Dr. Sorg arrived to assist with the delivery. However, he also took the opportunity to pry information from Cornelis, subtly implying that Sophia's condition could be extremely dangerous. Panicked, Cornelis begged the doctor to save Sophia, even if it meant sacrificing the baby. Hearing her husband's desperate plea, Sophia felt guilty for deceiving him. Meanwhile, Maria successfully gave birth to a healthy baby. To keep their plan on track, Sophia had to disappear. On the other hand, Jan returned to the tavern, hoping to sell Admiral Maria for an even greater profit. However, he was shocked to find out that tulip prices had crashed drastically. He tried to sell Admiral Maria for a lower price, but no one was interested in buying it. At home, Dr. Sorg informed Cornelis that a baby girl had been born. However, when Cornelis asked about Sophia's condition, the doctor slyly told him that she had not survived childbirth. Heartbroken, Cornelis entered the room only to find Maria cradling the newborn baby, while Sophia lay motionless on the bed, appearing lifeless. Dr. Sorg then told Cornelis that Sophia had died from a plague and advised him not to touch her body. Furious, Cornelis reminded the doctor that he had begged him to save his wife. But when Cornelis tried to approach Sophia, the doctor and midwife quickly pulled him away, insisting that the room needed to be sterilized immediately. As Cornelis left, tears slowly rolled down Sophia's cheeks. She felt guilty for deceiving her husband. At the tavern, Jan was on the verge of despair until a woman finally made an offer of 400 florins for Admiral Maria. This offer sparked competition among the crowd, causing the price to soar even higher. Meanwhile, Sophia was placed inside a coffin and taken away by boat. Cornelis could do nothing but grieve, believing his wife was truly gone. When Maria arrived with the baby, Cornelis asked her to find a wet nurse. However, Maria lied and told him the baby had already been fed. Maria tried to comfort Cornelis, promising to care for the baby as her own. Eventually, Cornelis accepted the child and named her Sophia. Elsewhere, Dr. Sorg and several men waited at the painter's house for Jan to make his payment. Jan was confident he could sell Admiral Maria for 8,000 florins, which would allow him to pay off his debt easily. However, when the buyer arrived with the money, he demanded the actual flower, not just the ownership certificate. Jan attempted to leave and retrieve the tulip, but the men stopped him, fearing he would run away. Thinking quickly, Jan asked Garrett to fetch the flower for him, but he firmly warned his friend not to be tempted by alcohol along the way. Determined, Garrett set off, struggling to resist the lure of liquor in order to complete his mission. Meanwhile, Sophia's two accomplices opened the coffin to set her free. However, overwhelmed with guilt, she started crying. After much thought, she finally decided to abandon her plan and return to her husband. Elsewhere, Garrett successfully retrieved the tulip bulb from the orphanage, while Jan and the others anxiously waited for his return. On his way back, Garrett saw someone beating a donkey. Without hesitation, he stepped in and drove them away. The onlookers called him a hero and rewarded him with free drinks, something Jan had strictly forbidden. But one thing led to another, and as an alcoholic, Garrett eventually forgot his main task. Meanwhile, Sophia returned home and saw Cornelis gently cradling Maria's baby. The sight filled her with inner conflict. After hesitating for a moment, she decided to leave, realizing that there was no way back for her, to either Cornelis or Jan. She removed her blue cloak, symbolizing her choice to leave the past behind and step into the future. At the same time, Willem returned from his naval duty and met Maria. However, Maria, furious, confronted him for leaving without a word. Willem explained that he had seen her with the painter and assumed she had betrayed him. Maria then clarified that the woman Willem saw was actually Sophia. She then showed him the baby and claimed it was their child. unaware that Cornelis was secretly listening to their conversation. Cornelis's heart shattered as he realized that his wife had deceived him and that the baby he had cherished was not his own flesh and blood. Garrett finally arrived, but he was completely drunk and, unfortunately, had lost the tulip bulb he was carrying. The furious men abandoned Jan, threatening him as they left. After everything was revealed, Maria finally confessed the whole truth to Cornelis. At first, he didn't react, but eventually, he wrote a letter to honor Maria and Willem's marriage, giving them his blessing to raise the child. He forgave Maria and admitted his own mistake in once treating Sophia like a commodity. Cornelis decided to leave and handed over his house to Maria and Willem, with the condition that the child would remain his heir to preserve his name's honor. At the same time, the tulip market bubble burst, causing thousands of people to lose their fortunes overnight. Jan, now realizing that Sophia had disappeared, panicked when he found her blue cloak floating in the sea. Fear gripped him as he thought she might have drowned herself in despair. 8 years passed. Jan, still alone, continued painting Sophia in his attic. A monastery abbot, impressed by his work, commissioned him to paint a church mural. One day, while working at the church, Jan saw a procession of nuns entering. From atop the scaffolding, his eyes locked onto a figure he knew all too well. Among the nuns, Sophia stood, wearing a nun's habit. They exchanged a loving gaze, and the abbot, witnessing the moment, simply smiled, satisfied that fate had brought them together again. Meanwhile, Maria and Willem now lived happily with their growing family. They continued to honor Cornelis, and Maria remained grateful for his kindness, which had given her the chance to raise her child, Sophia.